So you are Chief Privacy Officer, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Now we're at a security conference, and a lot of people kind of lump privacy and security in, the same terms, but they're different and distinct, although they overlap. How do you see that distinction, between privacy and security?
I did both for a period of time. Privacy, a lot longer than security. Can't have privacy without security these days with all the technology and changes in healthcare. Certainly with the advent of the EMR, security became really a priority over privacy. Privacy is more dealing with employee mistakes, employee issues, snooping, things like that. Release of information as opposed to security, which is really what touches the employee and the patient day to day.
Talk about release of information. Key elements which, it doesn't always work optimally with hospitals, let's say.
Yeah, I think there was a recent headline that I saw which said, just do it. Don't hesitate. I think there's concerns on both sides though, because you have the average employee who's in charge of releasing information who doesn't want to make a mistake. Because if they make a mistake and release information to the wrong individual or somebody who's pretending to be the patient who really isn't, someone who's not entitled to the information, they know that their job is at stake. And then you have the people who just simply make mistakes. So I always felt that really the hospital should be the custodian, or the healthcare provider should be the custodian of the patient record. The patient should really be the one who controls what happens with their health information, who gets what and how much. Difficult to do. We don't have the technology for that yet, but that would be optimal.
And a lot of patients don't even realize that under HIPAA they have a right of access to their own health information.
Very true, although I do think that that more and more people are becoming aware. Our hospital processes over 200 requests for release of information every day. So it's quite a number of people who need access. Patient portal has been helpful. A lot of people have concerns about the patient portal. Information isn't readily available. The day they get their blood work, it's not available that afternoon. We do have some delays in place to allow a clinician to have a conversation with the patient before they actually get their results and start worrying or not worrying about what they see. So that's always a big concern. The patient really, in this day of instant gratification, if the patient can't see the result in their portal, they're not going to go to the portal. They're going to find other means to get the information they need.
And for those hospitals that do willingly impede or drag their feet with regard to patient access, they should be aware that fines have begun going up.
Huge fines. Yeah. Oh my goodness, this year was a big one. It seemed like most of the fines that were levied were against hospitals who failed to provide access to healthcare information for their patients, which was pretty interesting that seemed to be a huge focus this year.
And we have information blocking rules from ONC and CMS being finalized soon.
We do, yeah.
What do you expect to see?
I expect to see that info blocking is not acceptable. That's what I expect. Regardless of whether you have SUD, mental health, HIV, which is going to be in direct conflict with other laws that are out there. So it's going to be interesting to see how we reconcile not info blocking with laws that require us to block information until consent is obtained. So it's going to be interesting. Another challenge for healthcare, as it always is. It has been.
It's going to be complex, especially, given the imperatives of wider data sharing. ONC is prioritizing, patient access, patient-mediated exchange as a key kind of vector for interoperability.
Sure.
But the security of the data is paramount too. So
Absolutely.
Finding that balance is going to be quite a challenge going forward.
Yeah, and I think there's the use of the patient portal needs to grow. I think the portal is the perfect opportunity for that. If a patient sits in a doctor's office and can just log into the portal and show the physician or transmit the information, exchange that information that they want with that physician as they're seeing them real time, that would be optimal. It would, but that isn't today. That's future.
You're here to talk a bit about some updates to HIPAA?
Yep, HIPAA updates, a lot to do with OCR enforcements, particularly the BAAs that we see, the business associates out there that are getting hit with fines, in particular the release of information issues that we have. And hopefully, looking forward to perhaps seeing some changes to the regulation that make it a little bit easier for covered entities to comply with the regulation. Things like not having to get a patient to sign that they've received the notice of privacy practices. You have requirements that require it to be posted. You have requirements to have it be distributed. If a patient hasn't received the notice of privacy practices yet, that organization is pretty far behind.
Do you think HIPAA itself needs kind of a more fundamental rethink? I mean, it's been around since 1996 when the internet was still barely a couple of years old.
Right.
A lot
Internet,
of change.
email, there's so much
25 years.
changing. Yeah, absolutely. I think faxing should be obsolete. I think, interoperability should definitely be the focus. Making sure that physicians, the EMRs, that physicians with various EMRs can communicate with each other and send data through the EMR safely and securely, of course. And I do think HIPAA needs to be brought up to date with the technology. I think there's too many covered entities out there. When I talk to other colleagues in the field, they struggle. It makes me feel good because I understand and I have processes in place to ensure our compliance, but when I read some of the concerns that people have or talk to others in the field, they are so far behind in their compliance that it's a bit frightening. And yet we have our own set of problems, even with all the understanding that we do have with compliance. So it's interesting. I do think change is needed, and I think it's coming.
There was a story that caused a bit of stir a couple of weeks back with Ascension and Google and some data sharing. It was apparently above board. HIPAA compliant, BAs were signed, but still there was a lot of distress from some patients, and I think maybe it was just the names that were involved perhaps, but what's your take on that whole situation?
It's interesting that people were concerned with what was going on with Google, but not as concerned with what's going on with AWS. To me, AWS is storing just as much patient information as Google is. I think people just view Google as such an open and available platform that there were more fears with the potential breach of their confidentiality. For some reason, people have more confidence in Amazon services than they do in Google services. I know my concern, we have two sides of our campus. We have the hospital side, the healthcare side, and the education side. The education is on free Google for education. So I have excessive policies in place for my healthcare side to make sure that we do not cross over into the free services of Google with any of our PHI. But that requires constant work, uptake, education, training. It's a lot, but I think it's just because Google is such a known open platform that people were a bit hesitant on that.
Do you think the patients should just sort of get more used to the idea of their data being shared?
I think eventually they will. Yes, I think eventually people will come to realize that the healthcare organization is going to do what's in their best interest. I think we're kind of beyond the people who put their physician schedules out on a Google Calendar that's publicly available. You're still going to have those mistakes, but especially by small entities. But I think for the most part, the larger entities, patients are going to need to learn to have to trust that they're doing the right thing for them.